Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Smart 101 Retention Application webinar. To get started today, I'm going to introduce the three speakers that we have joining us. We have Dr. Marcus Smith, one of our Smart Deputy Program Managers, Miss Alexa Shade, our Smart Component Liaison Lead, and finally, Mr. Nick Krupansky, a Phase 1 Retention Scholar from our 2020 cohort, currently pursuing his PhD in Mathematics at Michigan State University. I'll now pass it over to Dr. Marcus Smith to get us started today.
Hey, thank you, Brittany. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Marcus Smith. I'm one of the deputy program managers for the SMART program, and I would like to extend an additional welcome to you all for joining our 2024 retention webinar. Hopefully, this is a very useful information that we're presenting to you, and we're able to dispel some myths or doubts that you may have about the program. As it mentions in my little short bio, not only am I a deputy program manager here for the SMART program, but I am also a Phase 3 SMART Scholar, my sponsoring facility being Air Force Research Laboratory. And as the presentation goes along, you'll learn more about what it means to be a Phase 3 scholar. But just a little bit of background, I started at Air Force Research Laboratory in 2011, and after a few years, I decided I was ready to return to school to pursue a PhD. And so like many of you, I was in your shoes trying to decide, the best vehicle to utilize to return back to obtain my PhD. And I stumbled across the SMART program. So we're super excited to have you all and tell you more about the program. And again, I just wanted to say thank you for tuning in. With that, I will hand it over to Alexis, our component execution lead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We have quite a lot of information to provide for you, and then we do have some guest speakers, and then we'll roll into our Q&A. But the webinar focuses on those who are already employed in the DoD in a full-time civilian position and are interested in applying for the SMART Scholarship. I also know that we've invited mentors and supervisors of potential retention applicants and some facility POCs to join this conversation today so that they can get a little bit more comfortable about what retention is like within the SMART program. And hopefully we can get all of your questions answered today. Slide. All right, so a few basic slides about what the SMART program is, a little catered towards retention. So when you take a step back and look at the Department of Defense, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, or STEM, within DoD STEM, SMART, you'll notice that our efforts are to influence STEM education and career development and make sure that we're meeting the need from pre-K through postdoctoral and the current workforce. So DoD STEM's mission is to inspire, cultivate, and develop exceptional STEM talent through opportunities that enrich current and future DoD workforce dedicated to tackle evolving defense technologies and challenges. So the SMART program falls under DoD STEM and is one of many STEM student workforce opportunities across the DoD. The SMART program is a combined educational and workforce developmental opportunity for STEM students, building the DoD's pipeline for civilian scientists, researchers, and engineers. Let's go on some basic benefits. All right, so what benefits do you receive from SMART as a retention scholar or as any scholar? And I've catered it a little bit towards retention. So first, SMART makes it simple and we provide your full tuition with no cap on tuition paid directly to your school. We provide a book allowance of $1,000 paid directly to the scholar and potential travel funds, more on that later. And finally, retention scholars maintain their DoD employment and therefore continue to maintain and draw a salary and accrue benefits while in the SMART program. Again, we have a lot more detail about that SMART stipend and how retention labor funding works in a few slides. And just a note, some of you who are DoD civilians who haven't any prior college experience, you can still apply to the SMART program as a DELMS applicant. So just keep that in mind that if you've already opened up a SMART application, you would have seen that there were two options for you to choose from. If you have no prior college experience, that would fall under DELMS. All right, next slide is basic eligibility. So the SMART program has general program eligibility requirements. For applicants applying in the 2024 cycle, you must be a US citizen, or you can apply as a citizen of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, or United Kingdom. You must be 18 years of age or older by the 1st of January 2026. You must have and maintain a cumulative GPA of 3.0 on a 4.0 scale. This means applicants must have a 3.0 GPA to apply for the SMART program, and they must maintain that 3.0 during their entire degree pursuit. Scholars must be planning to pursue a degree in the fall of 2025 or currently be enrolled in a US accredited college. They must be pursuing a degree in a STEM discipline, and the STEM disciplines are listed on our website, and we'll also cover that in the very next slide. And in order to apply, scholars must need at least 1 year of degree funding and no more than 5 years of degree funding. The length of funding is dependent upon how much time scholars need to either complete their current degree or start and finish a new degree. So for the 2024 application cycle, degree funding starts in August of 2025. So think to yourself, if you're currently in a program, you need to have at least 1 year left of that, or you can start and complete a brand new program. As for retention scholars, you already likely have a security clearance. That being said, you must maintain that clearance while in the program. Sometimes if you are going to be leveling up in your career or even making some level of transition, you might need a higher level of clearance established by the time you graduate. All of that can be discussed with your facility, but you must maintain the level of clearance that is required. During the summer months, unlike our recruitment scholars who attend internships, and you've likely heard about us promoting our internship opportunities for recruitment scholars, for retention, you either return to work full-time or continue to go to school during those summer months. And the SMART program is a scholarship for service program, which means awardees receive full tuition coverage for their education in exchange for commitment to work or maintain your employment as a DoD civilian. The commitment for SMART is 1-to-1. That's 1 calendar year of employment for every year the SMART sponsored degree is funded. Let's take a look at those STEM disciplines. So this is a list of our approved 24 STEM disciplines that SMART is able to fund. And that's for both SMART and DELMS. And this list can be found on our website. Keep in mind, these are broad umbrella categories. So if your major is not specifically listed in the slide, don't worry. The next slide will show some examples of degrees and where they might fall under in one of these 24 STEM disciplines. Okay. So like I said, on the screen, here's a few examples of degrees that are eligible. So the way we like to think about it is, if you can look for your specific degree in one of these larger degrees, you could take a look at what college or school of within your university does that degree program fall under. That's a really good indicator of how you should align and apply for your SMART funded degree. Especially with retention, we want to take a moment and make sure everybody here understands that SMART funds technical degrees only. We're looking for STEM degrees, not management, business, medical, art-related fields. We are unable to fund those. So even if your facility or your organization wants you to try to utilize SMART so that you can get a business degree or a management degree, we cannot fund those types of degrees, only technical tracks. And that goes for every applicant, not just retention, but recruitment as well. All right, let's talk a little bit of some specifics for applying and succeeding as a retention scholar. Let's go to the basics first. All right. A retention scholar is a scholar who is either on a renewable term employee or is employed in a permanent civilian position by their sponsoring facility at the time of and throughout the duration of the award. So in order to be selected as a retention SMART scholar, you must be selected by your current organization. If you are listening to this presentation and you're not sure if your current organization works with the SMART program, you can check out our website for a full list, or you could reach out to the program. I'm going to have some links for you at the end of this presentation. So just shoot us a quick note and we can assist you in finding out if your facility is participating within the program. Of all SMART scholars in our program, about 10% are retention, whereas the rest are about recruitment. This isn't something that SMART dictates. It's just the statistics year over year of how our SMART sponsoring facilities choose to utilize the program. And within this this small percentage, it also has the most variation on how it can work, which is why we've created this presentation for you so that we can hopefully address as many questions as we have. Most retention scholars apply for graduate level degrees, but that does not mean that there aren't a few who are completing their undergraduate degrees through SMART. And as previously discussed, retention scholars maintain their employment at their sponsoring facility throughout the award and service commitment, ensuring the continuation of federal benefits throughout the duration of the award. That also means that there's a unique partnership between the SMART program and your sponsoring facility with a mutual interest in seeing you succeed as a student. More on how to balance that in a few slides. All right, next is a little on the life cycle of the SMART program. So if you are selected as a SMART scholar, the SMART scholarship occurs in 4 programmatic phases. So we're going to review those here. Phase 0 occurs right after a scholar is awarded, and we call those awardees. There's a time period between the award going out next April and the time the funding begins in August. You'll have that opportunity to attend the SMART program's in-person orientation. You'll have time to talk more with the program, hammer out any details about the award with your facility, your employer, and the SMART program. And I just want to add a note here as well. You can check out the SMART Scholar Handbook. It is available on our website, but if you still have lingering questions about your award, that is the time to really make sure that you are reaffirming your award before accepting your funding. Phase 1 is when funding begins. This is when you are considered officially a SMART scholar. You're going to school, you're maintaining that work balance that fits best for you, and you're successfully completing your SMART funded degree. Once you complete your SMART funded degree, you will return to work full time, and that is when you enter into your phase 2 service commitment. So the time that you spend working at your facility in phase 1 does not count until you've actually completed that degree and you successfully transition to phase 2. It's when you're serving back your commitment. And again, for each year the program funding is received equates to 1 calendar year of full-time employment that you're required to maintain. And once you complete your SMART service commitment, you have officially completed the program and enter into phase 3. 91% of our SMART scholars to date have completed their service commitment and have entered phase 3, and some of them go on to become deputy program managers. So there's a lot of options for you once you do get to phase 2 and phase 3. We have a lot of other webinars that I'll point you to towards the end that talk about more of those opportunities. All right. All right, let's zoom in a little bit more on some specifics now that we've reviewed some of the general SMART timelines. The next 2 slides are intended to help facilitate a discussion between the retention applicant and retention supervisors and SFPOCs. So if you're an applicant on the line, be taking notes about the types of questions you need to start engaging with your mentor, supervisor, and facilities. And if you are a facility POC on the line, again, also please pay close attention to the advice that we have for you. So for retention scholar experience to be successful, the scholar and the facility must be invested. If the facility is not willing to have some skin in the game, meaning some level of either complete funding is available through receiving your current full stipend or other co-funding opportunities, talk a lot about that, they may want to consider other ways and other programs to upskill their workforce. In short, SMART retention only works if the scholar can be well supported by the sponsoring facility and given the time to complete their degree and be provided with adequate funding to do so, which is why we're leaning really heavy in this presentation on the funding element. It's important to understand too that the length of the award, the length of the award that you're going to need and how that is going to impact your labor hours. Statistically, many of our retention scholars are pursuing a PhD start to finish. That can be a 4 or 5 year commitment. And so there needs to be a lot of planning around during the next 4 to 5 years. How is the labor going to be executed? More tips on that as well. It's a good time to start thinking about and planning for and discussing with your facility, what school are you intending on going to? What is the degree program? Is it going to be local and in person? Is it going to be virtual? Is it going to be in person and far away at a distance? These are these are the types of questions you need to hammer out before applying to the program if possible, and definitely before accepting the funding, because it can have an impact on the long-term workload. To be successful as a retention scholar, you need to work with your facility to find ways to align your current work and the facility's mission towards the research of that degree pursuit. That is a great tip, that the more in line the degree that you're requesting to pursue is in line with the work either you're currently doing or future work that you will be doing. We have seen great success from SMART scholars in the past from those who are not just going and pursuing a degree that will have nothing to do. There's really no benefit to a facility in wanting to select a scholar who's not aligning their work. So again, another plug for why you need to work with your facility on what could be a really good alignment from your academic pursuits and what your work currently is. And the most impactful way to support, again, the retention scholar or yourself as a retention scholar is to maintain clear communication. Supervisors, applicants, and facility POCs must set communication internal guidelines with one another to really establish work expectations, school expectations, how funding is going to be dispersed. You need to be discussing work schedules, school schedules, and if that conversation has not yet started, we have a few checklists in our presentation that you can pick up and start that conversation if you haven't yet already. Speaking of, next slide is a helpful checklist. There are, the below are vital steps to take before applying to SMART as a retention scholar. First and foremost, you need to make sure that your facility is a SMART participating facility and active in the program. A list of facilities, like I said, can be found on our website, and we can also assist you in clarifying if your specific organization takes part. For example, I know we've been getting a lot of questions from USACE locations. Some of those locations do work with us and some don't. Some have supported retention and some have not. So that's just a great example of just double checking with the program to make sure that your facility is active and participating in the program. Next, you really need strong support from your facility. When we say strong support, we mean that your mentor and supervisor, yourself as the employee, your leadership where possible, and your facility POC, all of these folks are talking with one another about your application, your potential application to the program, and how you'd like to utilize the program for upskilling in the workforce. So again, if you don't know who your SFPOC is, this is a term that we use often. This is the specific designated point of contact that each of our sponsoring facilities have that interface with the program directly. So your supervisor and mentor likely is not the SFPOC. So if you don't know who that is, again, we will help you figure that out and put you in contact with them, because they're the ones that on behalf of the organization are responsible for making sure that you are clicking along on your degree pursuit. They're also the ones that put in for selection. So again, your application to SMART needs to have the involvement of your SFPOC. All right, next, a conversation about funding needs to take place between the applicant and the facility. That really needs to happen also with your financial POC. Let me add another person to that mix of who needs to be involved in this application phase. So we've got, again, the SFPOC, your first line supervisors, maybe even senior leadership, depending on the organization, your facility POC, and then a financial contact within the facility. If your facility's participated with retention before, likely there is a financial contact that they can put you in touch with so that you can discuss this further. But essentially, funding arrangements are going to be made to offset the salary between the SMART stipend and your regular salary. The SMART stipend is $30,000 to $46,000 based on the degree you're pursuing, and it may not cover your full salary. So SMART doesn't get involved in that. We do have some tips that we'll discuss when looking to secure co-funding. So we'll talk about that in a bit. To make this process work, applicants need to ensure that your organization can accept outside labor funds, which usually involves a 7600A form. SMART is going to transfer stipend funding through a military interdepartmental purchase request, or a MIPR, to your facility. And please note, while it's rare, not every facility is able to or willing to accept SMART funds. So that's another part of the discussion when you're checking in with your organization on if they can accept a MIPERD reimbursable funds. They can still select you as a retention. However, they must agree to be able to provide you certain guarantees like a salary and the ability to balance your work and your school. So if you run into these kinds of issues, you're not sure about your facility POC, or if your facility POC even has questions, to contact the SMART program, and we can help you sort out any prior experience with retention. And finally, you must agree on a work and school schedule with your facility, communicate and agree upon an arrangement and expectations for when is it that you're going to be approved to attend school. Is that going to be, full disclosure, the SMART program has a full-time enrollment requirement. So the program requires that you are going to school full-time. So when are you going to then factor in work? How does that going to look? So we have more information on that in a minute. So let's see. We're going to be encouraging you all to, with these good communication plans, to really solidify these plans in writing. Often for the application, you're going to need a letter of support from your facility, but we want you to take those steps further and really put into writing what that work and school balance is going to look like. Get it signed by facility mentors, supervisors, leadership where possible. It helps to protect both the scholar and the command. If anybody changes out positions, you as a SMART scholar later on down the road at least have some documentation of what was the expectation for work and school balance. And finally, I just want to make a note. I'm going to make several notes throughout this PowerPoint about the Air Force. So the Air Force applicants, there are going to be a few additional requirements that the Department of the Air Force is going to work with you on after the application closes. So that's actually our very next slide. If we do have, again, this is specific to the Air Force. Starting this application season, the Air Force has implemented a new process for retention applicants outside of the SMART application requirements. So once your SMART application is submitted and the portal closes, the Air Force is going to receive a list of all retention applicants from the SMART program. They are then going to provide that list of names and emails to the facility POCs that you're employed with. So we're going to let your employer know that you're applying to the program. Hopefully that's not a surprise to them because you've already talked to your facility, as we've been talking about in the previous slides. So this shouldn't be any new information, but we are going to give full visibility to the Air Force POCs on who has applied. And then they're going to work with you directly on additional information that might be needed. This package may include other essential documents for consideration, such as a higher level of leadership buy-in being required. And we really encourage you, we're actually going to host the Air Force, myself and the Air Force Component Liaison are going to be hosting a specific Air Force retention webinar tomorrow for any applicants and SFPOCs. It is a Teams government link. So if you haven't received that link, I know we sent it out to some who are already applied to the program, but if you are Air Force, you're interested, it's going to be at 1300 Eastern tomorrow, and our team can email you the Teams link for that. So back to our all hands retention webinar. Let's take a moment and review the SMART timeline, just so that you as an applicant have an understanding of where we are in this process. So you're nice and early, which is great that you're having these conversations early. So the application is open from the 1st of August until December the 6th this year. That's the first Friday in the month of December. At this time, retention applicants should be having conversations with their facilities and seeking out the letters of support from their mentors and supervisors. Selections, the portal to make selections is open from January through March. So the SMART program doesn't have any visibility of that process as it's happening. We get a list of the requested selections from your facilities in March, and awards are notified in April. And during that January through March time slot, facilities are reviewing scholar applications, they're conducting interviews, and they submit to the program their requested list of scholars. Keep in mind that even though you are applying as a current employee, facilities aren't under an obligation to select you or prioritize you, which is another great reason why during this application process, you're going to want to be meeting with all of the right people and really making a great pitch to them about the degree you're looking to pursue, why the SMART program is going to work, that you've thought through all of the ins and the outs of what that work and school schedule is to really stand out. Because you are, again, competing with all of the other potential applicants to get a SMART award. So once awards are sent, applicants will have the option to accept or decline their award. And then again, phase 0 is that time period between the award in April and the 1st of August. Just a little note that the program year for the SMART program starts the 1st of August. That's when you transition into phase 1. And our program year runs the 1st of August to the 31st of July. Also, in the month of August, travel projections are going to be submitted to the program. And this is a fairly new process where we are funding travel directly to retention scholars. More on that in a second. We have a specific process of how to assist scholars in commuting back and forth if that's the case. So we will be reaching out to you for that. And some retention scholars' academic pursuits require year-round enrollment, while others are on a more traditional semester system. Therefore, you may be returning to work at your facility during the summer breaks, and this would be part of your discussion with your facility. Again, it's really important that you aren't just pitching the idea of, I'm going to go get a PhD. I'm going to get a PhD from this university. I'd like to do this virtual online. Here's how I'd like that to go. So again, there's a lot of variation on where you're going to be during your summer, just depending on your regular academic school calendar. And let's see. Yep, that's all I wanted to say there. And we can move on to funding. Some funding specifics over the next couple of slides, and then we'll talk to one of our phase 1 retention Army students. So some specifics. On this slide, you'll see there are certain funds that the SMART program provides directly to the retention scholars. There's certain funds we provide to the universities, and there's certain funds we provide to the facilities. So SMART is going to collect a direct deposit form from every awardee, including retention. This is something we haven't done in many previous years. We started doing this within the past year. And so we are going to be directly depositing the miscellaneous allowance and the travel funds. And those funds will be deposited in August. So the miscellaneous allowance is $1,000. That's $1,000 a year. That's to be used at your discretion. Receipts are not provided to the program. It's truly a miscellaneous allowance that you can use for books, new computer, whatever you need it to be. Additionally, retention scholars are eligible for up to $1,200 a week, not to exceed $15,000 annually in travel funds. So on our form, we're going to ask you to project out if you are traveling more than 50 miles from your academic address to your facility. So again, if you are choosing to go to school, not even in the same state, over 50 miles away in person, you're going to need to travel back and forth. So you'll project that out, again, $1,200 a week, not to exceed $15,000 annually. Travel funds don't cover, let's say, well, travel funds, we don't exceed the standard amount. So you can't request more than $15,000 a year. And travel to the academic institution or return to the facility for or after graduation is not something that we cover, and conferences aren't something that can be covered. So truly think of it as I need to get to my facility from my university next summer, and then traveling, any kind of travel back and forth. All right. So just knowing that the SMART program is going to be directly depositing these funds, that means you're going to receive a 1099 miscellaneous. That is for those allowance funds and travel funds. This will be in addition to your regular W-2 from your employer. So you're going to get a new form. And just note that taxes are not withheld from these expenses. So we do recommend that you speak to a tax professional regarding your specific tax implications, because the SMART program can't answer those questions. But just know that we'll send you a 1099 miscellaneous that will report any funds that we've directly deposited. Tuition super simple. We pay it directly. All educational fees no cap on tuition. We pay it directly to the academic institution, which is different than a few other programs. You won't have to submit forms to your organization to get tuition reimbursement. None of that. We pay it directly to your school. If you are attending a school that has just a regular fall and a spring, but you need to attend school over the summer, there is a process in place where you can request additional funds. So just keep that in mind. And then facility payments. The next few slides will go deeper into facility side of payments. So your facilities receive a MIPR for each retention scholar's annual stipend amount, plus a 30% benefit surcharge. The facilities use this funding to offset the cost of keeping their retention scholars employed while attending school full-time. And before we go into the details of co-funding, bridging the gap, all the ins and outs, we want to give a general disclaimer that every component can be vastly different from one another, and the internal processes between facilities can vary significantly, which is why it's a little difficult to answer specifics about your organization on this presentation. We'll do our very best to point you in the right direction or to give you generalities, but one more blanket statement is also that the Air Force scholars should totally attend tomorrow's webinar because, which again, hosted at 1300 Eastern, regarding the specifics of how your funding works. The Department of the Air Force essentially guarantees full salary for their scholars, so you don't necessarily need to go seeking co-funding opportunities. So really the next few slides are geared more towards Navy, Army, and other DoD folks. So next slide. With those disclaimers out of the way, a few notes about how the SMART program sends money to facilities. Like I mentioned, SMART is going to send a MIPR to the facilities that includes SMART Scholar stipend plus a 30% benefit surcharge, which is intended to offset the cost of maintaining the scholar's employment benefits. The MIPR funds are reimbursable RDT&E 6.1 and 6.2 funds. So please be aware that retention scholar stipends are not a bonus in addition to the scholar's full-time salary. Rather, it's intended to supplement the scholar's salary while they pursue their SMART funded degree. Retention scholars bill hours spent attending school full-time towards their SMART funds, and they charge normal labor hours towards their regular labor projects. So again, the SMART funding can't be used to fund any work that you're doing on your facility related specific projects. It is intended for school. The MIPR funds are provided to the facility annually. So the entire amount of the stipend plus the 30% benefit surcharge is going to land at the facility in August. And it must be utilized within the period of performance, which is in line with the SMART program year, which is the 1st of August to the 31st of July. Any unused funds are returned to the SMART program. And SMART recommends that facility POCs, financial POCs, supervisors, and scholars all discuss exactly how this funding is going to be received. A note on that in a sec. How and when it will be utilized, and come up with a schedule for burning through those funds so there are no surprises at the end of the period of performance. This is what we mean when we say create a work and school balance that helps the scholar to be successful. So when MIPR funds are sent by the SMART program, facilities are encouraged to accept these funds at their unburdened rates to ensure that the scholar is receiving the maximum potential of their SMART stipend. When SMART funds are received unburdened, this depletes, when SMART funds are received burdened, additional taxes added, additional funding taken away. This depletes the amount of funds that the scholar has direct access to, which is why we encourage our facilities to accept the funds unburdened and to have a conversation with your financial POCs to see if that's possible. Again, we can't dictate to your organization how they accept outside funds, but we are asking that the conversation be had so that more of the SMART funding can go directly to our scholars. When it comes to SMART Scholar stipends and civilian salary, there's often a gap. I don't know, there's probably nobody on this call who's making between $30,000 and $48,000 as your full salary. So there's going to be a gap. And that gap needs to be addressed since the SMART stipend is not going to cover your full salary. Therefore, it's facilities are highly encouraged to assist their scholar in bridging that gap and salary difference by either paying their full salary to go to school, like the Air Force does, or seeking co-funding options. So the gap in funding is where you will likely need to seek out and apply for other facility funding to supplement up to the regular salaried amount. We have some examples here of what we call co-funding opportunities that may be available to you. Your facility may allow you to charge to overhead. There may be facility-specific internal independent research development, IRAD funds. The Navy has NICE or 219 funds that you may apply for. Army and Navy both utilize ILIR. I know that we have an example coming up that maybe utilize ILIR, so we can talk about that. And a side note that some organizations, again, like the Air Force typically, are able to outright pay their scholars full employment while attending school without the need for additional sources. Again, join our webinar tomorrow if you are with the Air Force. And next slide. Okay. Now that we've talked about what SMART provides and the ways to bridge the gap, the next item to consider is exactly how labor hours will be divided to balance that school and work. Right? There are two different options in how to approach this. Again, this is general guidance from SMART. Your individual facility, your employer, has the ultimate authority to determine how this will work. And so, again, this is our guidance. First, there's this idea of a split approach, which compartmentalizes the academic funding and the facility funding. Essentially, the facility provided funding that may not have a direct alignment with your degree pursuit, meaning you're going to need to work on your regular scope of work when not attending school. Retention scholars split time between their academics, SMART funding, and their facility funding. So again, you'll have likely two Johns to charge hours to. When you're at school, you're charging to SMART. When you're at work, you're charging to SMART. This is another plug for why the location of your academic institution matters if this is your facility's approach. If you're attending a school that's not co-located with your facility and they need you to work periodically throughout the year, you're going to need to plan for travel and time away from school, and how is that exactly going to work? This approach may work for master's students or online coursework, but it is rarely successful for PhDs, we have found as a program. Next is a coordinated approach, which finds a way to financially support the scholar through different means of funding so that the retention scholar can be successful while focusing on their academic pursuit. So the facility provided funding is well aligned with the retention scholar's degree pursuit, or is otherwise untethered, i.e. you can charge to overhead because it's so in alignment. We typically see this successfully done with PhDs. And responsibilities and tasking for facility provided funding still allows the primary focus to remain on the academics. Again, if we can get that, especially if it's PhD, your PhD degree pursuit in alignment with the work you're currently doing, that's typically where we see a lot of success. So as you can imagine, without co-funding or that salary guarantee, it's often not financially advantageous for the scholar to pursue a SMART degree. It defeats the purpose of retention, and we don't want you to find this out after the award has been made. So really encouraging you to have these discussions now so you can determine if this is even the right program for you, and especially for your facility POCs or supervisors on the line, if you all can't figure this out during this application time, we recommend that you consider not adding this to your selection list until you're able to figure it out. We have seen not good things happen when it's not figured out in advance. So please remember, it doesn't work for everybody. But one person it does work for is going to talk to us next. We have, I'm going to go ahead and transition it over to SMART scholar Nick, who's going to talk a little bit about his experience with U.S. Army DevCom Ground Vehicle Systems Center in Warren, Michigan. So Nick, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about your experience with SMART.
All right. Thanks, Alexis. So yeah, my name is Nick Krapansky. I started the SMART in the 2020 cohort, which is an odd one because that was right when I was literally got the award, and then all of a sudden we went on pandemic, like, work from home and everything. So that was quite quite an interesting time. A little bit of background on me for myself. So my undergrad was back in 2007, so I was out of school for quite some time. And then when I decided I wanted to go back to school, I actually took advantage of some other kinds of funds where it was a little bit easier to see if I wanted to go back. That was the MS at Michigan Dearborn. And then I started looking about going back for a PhD and how to do that in a way that I could keep my paycheck coming in, if I'm honest. And so SMART bubbled up to the top when I was doing my research. what led me to SMART was working with some senior engineers at my facility. They had been working on projects using the ILIR, which was mentioned a little earlier, the in-house or in-laboratory. I might have gotten it wrong. In-house laboratory independent research projects. So those are competitive within GVSC, and you apply for them. They had some extra funds on one, so I helped them out with the project. I liked it. I started applying for those while getting my master's, and those have been really helpful way to kind of make up my budget deficit in terms of salary, is to try to write ILIRs that are aligned with my research, so that way I can kind of keep more time focused on the academics during the school year. Um, and why did I want to go back? I don't want to manage people per se. I'm not I'm not really interested in a supervisory role where it's strictly management. And GVSC has a technical track, and to be competitive, it just made sense it would help to have a doctorate. So that was kind of the focus of trying to get into the technical track rather than the management supervisory track. My So I should say a little bit more about what I'm doing. So I'm at Michigan State University. Um, I'm in the applied math program, and so what I focused on is applying machine learning to problems in gas dynamics, which kind of ties to my um, undergraduate degree in nuclear engineering. I have a lot of familiarity with it, and there's some applications to using techniques from rarefied gases into mobility. So my ILIRs have kind of focused on that, and that's how I've kind of dual tracked ILIR with academic time. What else? The lot of First of all, I'm really happy that Smart's doing this for retention scholars, because back in when I would have started, this would have been 2019, and there was not a lot of information about what a retention scholar is different. There was very limited information within the handbook and just out there. So I'm really glad that these are here, and hopefully you'll get some questions that are towards me that I can help answer. I think the key ones that I want to hit here are you have to have good communication with your supervisor, and preferably like in the next rung up of leadership. We have the associate directors at GVSC, and my associate director has been extremely supportive, which has just helped a ton. It was mentioned a little earlier to make sure when you start working to get things in writing, we had like a memorandum of understanding between me and my supervisor and my associate director. It's just helpful to write it down and be as clear as possible, because a lot of the friction I've seen on things like this is like expectations were assumed rather than stated, and you can get into some trouble. But if you're upfront and you communicate a ton, it shouldn't be a problem as long as you have that leadership support. The other thing that they're not going to tell you from the government perspective, but I've been out of school for a long time, and going back for a PhD, now I'm suddenly a very low level employee of my PhD advisor. So there's a whole nother relationship that you have to start thinking about managing. Now, if you go to so the funding side, I've never had any real problems. At Michigan State, they've always known how to handle smart funding and getting the money, and I've never handled a bill at Michigan State. But even though they are familiar with SMART, that doesn't mean individual faculty in individual departments know what a SMART scholar is. So it can be a bit of a challenge to make sure you're setting boundaries with your academic advisor, because again, they're used to people either coming right out of undergraduate without any professional experience. So they're used to just sending emails at weird times of the night, or like telling you to work through, the weekend or work through the day or whatever. But if you have commitments with your sponsoring facility, that's gonna cause problems pretty quick. The other problem too I've seen with just my personal advisor, Andrew Chrisley, he's the one in the red in that picture on the right-hand side. So just last minute travel, right? For these, if you're just if you're only ever been in school and your advisor's telling you need to go to there's a conference in Germany coming up in the next 30 days and he wants you to go, that's usually fine for them, but it can prove difficult for government folk because, we usually have to get that kind of foreign travel approved to take training, and you might not have the questions of like passport issues come up. So it's just things to be aware of, that the faculty is not accustomed to professionals necessarily coming back and getting a degree. That could, if this is my experience, maybe you're looking at someone who's had a lot of smart scholars and they know and have a really good plan on how to balance that. But that's been one of the things that's been eye-opening, is just having to kind of reassert boundaries with academic faculty that aren't used to a student reasserting any boundaries. It was mentioned before about applying for SMART had the length of time. So I applied for 4 years, just because if you look at any kind of site out there, I know a lot of them will say PhD in the STEM and it's 4 years. I would just go ahead, if you're my personal experience, and I got approved for a 5th year, just ask for 5 years, because if you finish early, it's fantastic. But if your research is not progressing as fast as you hope, or you're hitting some snags, you don't want, it wasn't horribly stressful, but it was like another thing just in the back of my mind to double check of, hey, I need to write this. My advisor needs to write a letter. And I got to submit this, a request for an extension. Just ask for the maximum time up front. I hope I don't get in trouble from the other folks on the call here from SMART, but it's just especially with PhD, like your coursework is going to be typically in the first 2 years. And that's going to be pretty straightforward. But once you start focusing on research and writing your dissertation and focusing on getting papers published, that's really not a linear process. So maybe you're lucky and your research goes exactly how you thought it would go, and your advisor's happy, and you're publishing, every semester you're getting maybe a paper or two out, and you're doing fine. It's not a problem. But I would just say ask for more time, because it's definitely not it's not straightforward how your research will go or what avenues are revealed to be dead ends. What other things do I have? Oh my gosh. Definitely have the conversation though about, I'm glad that it's talked about how much money's coming to the facility. Make sure just involve your supervisor so much. I can't stress that enough, of make sure they know what to expect in terms of you're not getting a bonus. This is like offsetting your costs to them, right? I would try to explain it and coach it like that you're trying to help them minimize your overhead to their organization, if that's even a concern. Like I said, my leadership has been super good about finding things to put me on that are appropriate for, the amount of time I can dedicate to work versus school. So it's really important that you have those conversations. What's another thing that I wanted to talk about? Yeah, the faculty, it's going to be a bit of a shift in gears for you, especially if you've been working for a while, to go back, because you'll have to have a mature conversation that your faculty advisor is probably not used to having from any of their other students. And in that sense, you're probably well positioned for any of these statement of purpose or research interest pieces that you're going to have to write up for these applications, because again, you're kind of going up against, very young people that are going from undergrad directly to graduate school. I can only speak to the graduate school part. they're going from undergrad to graduate school, and the reason they're doing this is because they don't know what they want to do. Where, I was able to coach my applications of, I need to get a doctorate because I want to do a technical position. I don't want to do supervisory. I need it to be competitive. This is how it fills out my organization. So those were really easy to write. And I'm trying to think of the SMART application process. I mean, it was pretty straightforward. It doesn't, a lot of this stuff, you'll kind of get a little bit of duplication between writing a statement of purpose for school and then writing it for the SMART. So that'll be convenient for you. Yeah, I don't know if there's any questions that I can try to answer.
Yeah, that's great, Nick. No, some questions have been coming in. We're definitely going to bring you back in for those specific questions about your exact experience. But thank you so much. You gave us some great future thoughts too to incorporate into this presentation about, navigating with your universities about, hey, I'm on this Department of Defense scholarship. I have these I have these work requirements, and also I need to get back to work at some point. No, you're not in any trouble for mentioning that. If your recommendation, the length of time you need is the length of time you need. If you applied for less and you need more time, we have mechanisms for that. So I think we can get to that in our Q&A for sure. So appreciate you sharing your experience so far. And I know we're going to have questions for you in a minute.
Great.
Awesome. All right, just a couple of more slides from us, and then we will open it up. There are a robust amount of questions and answers, so Marcus, get ready. But before we do that, we want to talk about some hard facts about being a retention scholar. So there are many points to consider when you're applying to be retention, and to be clear, these are the realities of the commitment you're looking to pursue. So SMART scholarship retention is not a good fit for everybody in the Department of Defense. We went through all of the ins and the outs in this presentation. So if you're having a little bit of trouble, finding how it would exactly work for you, and your facility, don't forget it's you and the facility in this conversation. So be sure to get started on those conversations as soon as possible. We want you to be able to take advantage of this program. However, there's substantial amount of upfront work for you to ensure before you're selected, so that you can have a seamless experience. Different facilities vary on how they handle the opportunity, so there's not always one solution that works. One facility is not the same as the other, is not the same as other components. So each facility has their established ways of processing funding and working with employees to pursue higher education. If there's no solution to funding or agreement established, this program may not be for you. You're navigating between work, like Nick was just talking about, it's navigation between work and school life and going back to school and finding funding throughout the duration of the award. And ultimately, you are an employee of an organization. So this employer is the one that pays you, pays your salary, and you'll likely need more than your education at the moment. So you're at the discretion of your facility to be utilized. And so we wouldn't ever want an applicant to go and try to force their way into retention if it's not working. So again, you need to be working with your facility to see if this works for both of you. If you don't have these established agreements, you may not be successful in this program. The location of your academic institution, we've talked about it several times, could be affecting your success. Let's see, it's crucial to thoroughly weigh the pros and the cons before committing to the program, and success requires setting clear expectations with all parties involved to make sure that pursuing the scholarship works. So a few more, just wrapping up, some final reminders. Let's see. What slide are we on? Oh, another helpful checklist. We're all about checklists here in SMART. This is a great one to take a quick screenshot of to start the conversation with your facility. So again, I'll be very brief so we can make more room for Q&A, but it is an investment, the SMART scholarship. So communicate, set expectations, and discuss with all the appropriate parties. Make sure your facility is participating in this program. Make sure they can accept outside labor funds if required. Obtain support, not just support, approval from your supervisors and your facilities. Create a plan, and create a plan and to balance work and school. All right. and do all of this before applying, yes. So a couple more webinars that we've got coming up. Like I said, tomorrow, Air Force, gonna give it another plug. The Air Force execution leads for the SMART program are also going to be on that call to answer more specific questions. If you need the link, email our program and we'll shoot you that link. There's going to be another webinar in October for sponsoring facility focus, and then one more Let's Hit Submit webinar in November. So scan this QR code and you can get linked up with those additional support. And as always, you can reach out to our program. We'll put our program contact information at the very conclusion of this PowerPoint. And I think next we're moving into Q&A. Yeah. All right.
All right, thank you, Alexis. Yeah, we've had a lot of questions come in, so we will go ahead and get started with those. So one of the first questions we had, and we've seen a couple of times, is some questions around how long or how the list of retention applications is generated.
So what I think I'm hearing, how the list of applications is generated. So again, the facilities are going to be notified of applicants as soon as you apply. So if you're a facility POC asking that question, we're going to let you know who from your organization has reached out. If that's not exactly what this question is meant to be, we might ask for a little bit more clarity on that one.
And how long do you need to work for the DoD to qualify for the SMART program?
Leave that to Marcus.
Yeah, so there is no requirement on the SMART side in terms of how long you've had to be employed with the Department of Defense. I would speak directly to your facility to see if they have any type of requirements. A lot of the times, as a new employee to the Department of Defense, you may come in on a probationary period. I know I did back in 2011, and that probationary period was 3 years. I didn't apply for SMART until after I was through my probationary period.
All right. Next question. So I am currently employed with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer and have some questions regarding the SMART scholarship, specifically looking to know if it's possible to maintain my employment while participating in SMART.
I think this goes for every retention, is that it is extremely rare that there's a situation where you're employed and then placed on an LWOP. That is the lowest. We don't want to see that in the program. So it is expected that you're maintaining your employment. Programmatically, I'll just answer this one too, that if for whatever reason you still want to apply to SMART, your facility is not involved and you feel comfortable with the idea, you can always not be employed any longer and apply to the SMART program as recruitment. So I'll just leave it at that. Yeah. But we hope you maintain your employment. Yeah.
All right. Next question. So if you're a senior executive, are there ways to obtain support for the single GS-15 or SES position the organization has while you're pursuing your education?
So I can jump in there. The only funding that SMART is providing would be to supplement your salary. We cannot provide additional funding to bring in someone as a temporary replacement to you. That would be up to your organization.
All right. Is there any information that we can share about utilizing 911 GI Bill benefits?
Well, so with GI Bill benefits, that'll cover tuition. So that's one of the major benefits that our program offers. And this goes for recruitment or retention, what we tend to say is that because SMART funds the full tuition, maybe don't utilize your 9/11 benefits and save that for a family member. I know a lot of those are transferable to spouses or children. So you might want to consider just holding on to those benefits if you're pursuing SMART, just because it's not needed. It's part of the benefit of our scholarship. And it's full tuition, and I know GI Bill benefits have more like caps on tuition, so we're a good deal here.
All right, a few questions specifically about sponsoring facilities and kind of around what if your workplace isn't listed as a sponsoring facility? Can I change facilities to work at a location that would sponsor me? Kind of how does that work?
That's a tricky one. That's a tricky one. So the ideal situation is that you know, we verify with you that if your organization is not participating, contact us to see if there's maybe something that you're just not seeing on the website. If your facility is not participating, there is a potential that they could become a smart sponsoring facility. It's a little late in this selection cycle to be maybe thinking about that. That could be a future thing. So if your organization isn't currently participating, we verified it, let us know. Marcus, I don't know if you want to speak to the idea of applying and maybe even being picked up by a different organization. It's a little tricky.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add. I guess a different option would be to reply as a recruitment scholar and be picked up by a separate organization. Have we had instances in which people transition to a different facility as a retention scholar through applying for SMART?
Yes, extremely rarely, and usually it's a
Right.
sister organization. Like it's something
Okay.
that it's a very easily transferable employment status because the selection needs to be made by the organization that's going to pick you up, and therefore you have between April and August to navigate all of the transferring of your employment to a different organization, have them establish that MIPR.
Yeah.
It's extremely difficult, and we've seen it just from like sister sites.
All right, so we have a question for Nick, just kind of to talk through what your experience was with the application process.
So I'm assuming they're asking about the SMART application process and not
Yes.
individual schools. SMART's pretty straightforward, honestly. There's going to be a lot of like the pedigree information that you're going to fill out for any of the actual academic programs. The ones that are different that you wouldn't encounter would be trying to, if I remember correctly, again, this is now 4 years ago. You had to make a statement. You have to explain what you're pursuing and how it's tied to your sponsoring facility or your service branch. Like make that connection of why it's important for your STEM, whatever STEM field you're pursuing, how it aligns with both your sponsoring facility or your broader service organization. But my experience is, you'll have a pretty good, well, hopefully you'll have a pretty good idea of what kinds of things are of interest inside your organization. And, we're very engineering, math, computation oriented at GVSE. So it was not that hard to kind of just draw the lines explicitly between why get an applied math degree. Well, it's because we're doing things in machine learning, we're doing things in automation, and that'll help achieve our goals at GVSC. Plus, if all you have to do is go look at I'm going to use the Army. The Army's always putting out their focus, their S&T focus as a huge organization. So making connections to those is helpful in the application process. I know they asked for multiple sponsoring facilities, but again, I think that's more geared towards the recruitment, because the whole reason I did SMART was because there was only one sponsoring facility I put on, and that was GVSC, because they're paying my bills. So, some of that stuff is, I would highly recommend having a lot of conversations if you're doing something beyond the sponsoring facility. Where I'm at now is going to be my sponsoring facility. If that's not the case for you, I would highly recommend you have a lot of conversations, because otherwise that'll be one more thing on top of a busy cycle of, taking GRE exams if you haven't already, and getting application packages prepared for other universities. Plus, they'll start asking you to, attend open houses or be on calls with faculty. And the whole point, you're also going to want to start down selecting to maybe an advisor. Because again, the other, I know I'm jumping everywhere, but when you get in there, a lot of these other cohorts at the academic program you're in, they don't have a problem staying there 6-7 years to finish their degree. That's going to be very different for you, because conversation with your academic advisors, I have to be done in 4 years or I have to be done in 5 years. So what are we going to do to make sure that happens? You're also different because all those other students are going to be teaching. They're going to be on teaching assistantships or research assistantships, and here you come in and you look like the monopoly man because you are fully externally funded from the university's perspective. So that makes you a very unique person within the program, usually.
Okay, thanks. All right, so next question, is this a competitive application? Or if we qualify and meet all of the requirements, will we get approved?
I think it's competitive. I was just aware that we turned people down. I know that based on what I remember is you went through the first, I'm jumping on people, I'm sorry. If you went through the first round, which was basically like, okay, you've met, like, you can be applying and we like you. And then all the sponsoring facilities put people in order and you kind of are asked to put your sponsoring facilities in order. And then it's like, if you're familiar with like the matching process for residents and medical. It's like if your sponsoring facility put you first and you put that sponsoring facility first, chances are you're gonna be good. In my case, there was only one facility, so.
All right, Marcus, do you want to touch on if there are any overseas locations?
Okay, so we don't have overseas facilities in terms of sponsoring facilities that you can select to potentially sponsor you from education to civilian employment. We do, however, offer internships with some of our international partners. And so there's an opportunity after your first intern, if you're awarded a scholarship, SMART scholarship, after your first internship with your sponsoring facility, there is an opportunity for subsequent summers for you to apply to go to one of our international sites.
Okay, so next question. If my supervisor will support me doing this program only if I continue to work full time, would I be able to take one class at a time as a SMART scholar?
So unfortunately, a requirement to be a SMART scholar is being full-time in school. So whatever that course load is for the specific university, typically it's at least 12 credit hours.
All right. Do all retention SMART scholars require co-funding? Or are there differences between the components?
Well, Marcus knows this one firsthand with the Air Force. By and large, the Air Force does not require co-funding. Again, we got a great webinar tomorrow on that. But Marcus, maybe you can just describe a little bit about your experience since you were an Air Force retention scholar about how did that funding go for you?
Yeah, so with me specifically coming from the Air Force Research Laboratory, my organization used the stipend money just as supplemental. My salary remained the same. I was unaffected. They created a new line item for me to do civ pay, and there was no change whatsoever. Once the SMART funding came in, things proceeded as normal. I was a full-time student. That was my only requirement, being a full-time student. And there was good alignment in what I was doing in terms of my research and just the interest from my sponsoring facility. So it worked out pretty well.
And actually, if you don't mind, Brittany, I have a question for Nick about so it's my understanding that things like NICE funding and then ILIR, what does the timing of that funding look like between, all right, I know I want to apply for SMART, I know I need this co-funding. When is the application to secure the ILIR funding before SMART funds? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, how do you navigate that?
So I know because I put in an application that the ILIR funding, at least for GVSC, I think it's Army-wide though. They generally go out in July and then you get notified of an award. It should be before October 1st because they want it to tie to the fiscal year. That's usually when I've seen the ILIR announcements go out for the GVSC. The way it works, I'm always going to speak to ILIR and Army, but generally you have like a topic and it's up to 3 years that you can continually ask to focus on that topic. So if you have something already and it's kind of aligned with what you're doing, it could just be, the second year you're applying and then saying, hey, I'm doing, there's usually statements in there that you're tying it to your organization mission or something. And then you can also mention that, I'm pursuing SMART, etc. That this would be, support my educational progress as well as my educational progress moving the ILR along. But the deadline is usually the announcement's usually in July, the deadline's in August, and then they announce around October 1st to tie with the fiscal.
Right. So next question. Is the first step being accepted into an academic program, or do we apply first to the SMART program?
There's no first step. It's whichever deadline's first. So what I did when I applied is I said which universities I had applications pending with. Because ultimately you don't hear back from SMART until April-ish, I think. And by then you'll usually have accept reject letters from however many programs you applied, and you haven't said yes to SMART yet, so.
All right. Let's see. Alexis, how do we indicate in the application that we are a retention applicant?
There's check boxes in the application where there's drop-down menus that ask you, are you currently employed, and a series of questions about what type of employment, so that we can really narrow down, are you truly retention, or are you just in a student program, temporary summer hire? That's not what we mean when we talk about retention. Retention are true full-time employees of an organization, not just student hire. So there are some drop downs within the application where the questions will prompt you to answer, and it'll help you decide that. And then from there, the application itself will then have specifics for retention. You'll have the ability to also identify what organization you're working with. And on that section, it is a drop down of all currently participating SMART facilities. So if you don't see yours there, again, be reaching out to the program so we can help you with that.
Okay. Can retention scholars request travel funding for per diem during the summer to include lodging and meals and incidentals?
So retention scholars can request an ISP, internship supplemental payment, if the facility that they are traveling to for the internship is more than 50 miles away from their institution. Is that correct, Alexis? Am I saying that backwards?
No, it's a form that they're going to fill out. It's not per diem because it follows the guidelines of GSA per diem, but it is not through DTS. It is not an official DTS form. It is like DTS, so that we could help you think in terms of how far are you traveling and the dates of your travel, but we don't operate in that same way where it's giving you specific per diem. Instead, it's $1,200 a week, up to $15,000 in total. So you're essentially giving us the dates of your travel and the distance, and we're giving you that flat $1,200 rate. So we don't get in the weeds on that.
All right. So the next question, so my undergrad GPA was below a 3.0 back in 2014, but I've already been accepted into an engineering graduate program that starts in March of 2025. Can I apply for this scholarship after my first semester to demonstrate a 3.0 GPA?
So yes, you can apply, you would be applying for the SMART scholarship next year. So for the 2025 cycle to be awarded for the 26 cohort. But yes, once you've demonstrated that your GPA is above a 3.0, go for it.
If we're applying to SMART, can we still apply and accept other university scholarships and or grants that are not for tuition?
So you are not allowed to accept additional government funding. I'm pretty sure you can supplement our funding with other university-driven efforts, though.
As long as it's not federally funded, like Marcus is saying. And then we would also just ask you, this is something we always ask any applicant or any scholar, is that, SMART is a fully funded scholarship. We give you stipends to live on, we pay your full tuition. So do you need to accept, like that GI Bill question earlier, you may not need to accept these other scholarships. You can accept them maybe in name only and decline their funding. But if you are accepting other scholarships, another thing to keep in mind too is that SMART has that service commitment. And so any other scholarships you're accepting can't also have a commitment to any other type of organization. So be careful about that. But really it's the source of the funding can't be federal. But other than that, have at it.
All right. So the next question is, are employees on temporary appointments, so not term, eligible to apply as a retention scholar, or should they apply as a recruitment scholar?
I think I would ask your sponsoring facility that question. You would be eligible, yes, but if your term is set to expire while you're away at school, that would be something your facility would need to figure out. So I would pose that question to the facility.
Is the time you spend earning your degree going towards your overall time in the government service? Are you retaining your GS level or moving higher in the GS scale as you are earning your degree?
Yeah, so you are still accruing service. So I was away for 5 years, and that 5 years went towards the years I've been a civilian in the Air Force. It is completely up to the sponsoring facility to determine how they will assess your progress and if they will give you promotions or salary bumps. So those situations are fairly unique.
Just a quick comment, because I'm actually going through it. Well, if you're all retention, you all are going through the performance appraisal periods. Make sure like you have conversations and you put points in for what you're doing academically, since it's smart. Because if you just say you're a smart scholar and then you go to your, what did you do for the year? If you haven't said I've published this paper, I've gone to these conferences and presented results for a smart funded degree, you want to make sure you're still like showing I am doing things even though I'm a smart scholar, but it's, you know, it's a it is a full-time job to go back to school, so don't be like fooled by anyone telling you that you can do it. You will feel the pressure to, get research done, get it published and present it. So make sure you're capturing it in your in your internal government performance, so your supervisors and your directors have something to, keep you moving along a little bit while you're away at school.
Right. So the next question was, if you apply to a PhD but determine during the course of your degree that a master's is more appropriate, is that a possibility, or is that viewed as failure to meet the application?
I can answer this one, Marcus. I saw you were off mute, so I didn't know if you want to jump in there. But so you're applying to the SMART program. You've done all this legwork to talk to your facility about a PhD. Things do happen. So if that is the event that you're not able to complete this PhD program, you can request a decrease to a master's level. It would require your facility to get involved. And again, it can get a little messy too with if we've already expended the funds, we need to pull some back. So just if you are progressing in your degree and you're concerned about your ability to be successful, to reach out to the program. So we do have procedures and policies in place that may be able to assist you to decrease to a master's.
All right. Would military training interfere with the 5-year limit full-time requirement? For example, if we have to go on a multi-month training or deployment, would we lose SMART and then need to repay?
So you have the option to do a leave of absence for SMART, and that could be for up to 2 years. And so I would explore, if you're awarded the SMART scholarship, a leave of absence would possibly be a way for you to still remain a part of the program.
Anything over 4 consecutive weeks, we would consider that leave of absence. So if you're part of like a reservist unit and you're called up for deployment, then we can just put a pause on that as well. That's typically what we've seen. But the 2 weekends out of the year, that doesn't require that. But just make sure that your facility also understands any additional considerations like that. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any insight that we can provide into the success rate for applicants passing the initial SMART program review before being considered by sponsoring facilities? This is probably more of a recruitment question, obviously a little less retention.
Yeah, and I would just encourage, that does sound like a recruitment style, because for retention, working with your facility is the way to get visibility and to be considered for selection. And if you're not doing that, no one's selecting you. So make sure that you are working with your facility. But for recruitments, we've got a few more webinars. We had that QR code at the beginning, or you can just check out the website where you can come and get those kind of questions about how to make your application stand out. But because you're currently retention, like Nick keeps saying, you know, I only got one facility and those are my people, so I'm just going to go talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I have the insight of the facilities are putting people in order, because obviously in my conversations when I was applying, I'm telling my associate director I want to do this, and he's telling me he's getting a list and he wants to put me as high, and he's advocating to put me as high on that internal list as he can, right? So yeah, for that question is definitely more towards a recruit going in and it's a black box coming out. But as a retention, you should be having these conversations, and you probably have a good idea before SMART is saying you've been awarded, whether or not you're, likely going to get it. Past the first round. The first round, if you don't pass the first thing, they'll tell you right away in January-ish.
All right. So the next question, Alexis, is for you. So I'm a Navy civilian currently working at a sponsoring facility, and I've expressed interest in the SMART scholarship to my supervisor, but they're not sure who our POC is, our SFPOC is. Does SMART maintain a list of POCs for each sponsoring facility so that I can get in touch with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you reach out to, we're going to put all of our SMART at SMART Scholarship or SMART CL at SMART Scholarship. Those are two of the email addresses where you can get a direct line to us. If you have any questions about, especially retention, we're going to be able to look up your facility POC, and we'll put you in contact with them so that they have visibility, and then your supervisor can get linked in on this conversation as well. I'll say this too, I don't think we had it in our presentation, but some organizations actually do have an internal process of vetting their retention applicants. So it's not just that you need to make it past SMART, you really need your facility to know and have their support. And then even to ask them, are there any internal discussions that are occurring in that January through March that I need to be aware of? Again, I've seen some organizations, even in the Navy, where they have an internal vetting process, and they're going to require, kind of similar to what the Air Force is dictating for all of their applicants. Some organizations do that more individually. So we definitely want to put you in contact with your facility POC as soon as possible so that you can begin inquiring on any specifics that your command may have.
Right. And this next question is a kind of a degree specific, just looking for a little clarification. So someone mentioned that they didn't see architecture as a STEM degree, but thought that Congress had passed a bill designating architecture as STEM. Would the degree need to be a master's to qualify for SMART? Just looking for clarification.
So architecture as a STEM for so many universities is under a different type of program. It's not a STEM. It's not one of our designated STEM that the DoD is recognizing for our program's purposes. We have seen some architecture more under like general construction, which falls under civil engineering. So there's a few steps that could be made, but by and large, there's no architecture other than naval architecture.
Yes. Okay.
But whenever I hear that, I typically think you're probably thinking building design, and then I think, could it be civil engineering if that's more that program? But architecture as a general STEM typically doesn't fall under our umbrellas. You could ask your facility if, like, is there a different program? And that's another, actually, if you don't mind, Brittany, if you're thinking of a specific program, find the website link to that university and send it to your organization, have them run it by their HR folks. Is this something that can work for you all? Because that's going to be our program's first question is this something your facility wants? If it's a very niche STEM discipline, the facility would be the one to indicate to us, as long as it's not a management track or a doctoral or a medical degree, they're going to be the ones that can determine if that's useful to them.
Right. So another question came in about what are some appropriate uses of the SMART travel allocations?
I can take that one. So again, if you are in your facility let's use the example of China Lake. right? It's pretty rural. There's not a lot of universities around Ridgecrest, California. Most universities are over 50 miles, right? And so likely you as an employee would need to be traveling over 50 miles. And you may determine with your facility POC that, okay, I'd like to come back and periodically work. Maybe that's once a month. And so I'm going to say I'm going from Ridgecrest, California to, let's say I'm going to UC Davis, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. You're going to discuss that when and how long am I staying at each time, and you're just going to disclose that to the program. We're going to calculate out the $1,200 every single week that you're going back and forth, because again, you know, I'm doing some research at UC Davis and I'm doing some of my research at China Lake. And so that's typically what we see, or long blocks of time saying I'm going to leave in September and I'm not coming back till December. But those are two specific examples of I'm traveling more than 50 miles from September the 1st to September the 2nd and then back. And so that's how we work through the allocation, is truly you determine what that back and forth looks like. Just keeping in mind that we don't pay for things like conferences. I graduated, I want to go to my graduation ceremony. Those are examples of what we don't pay for.
All right, so we've got time for probably one or two more questions. So this next question is, I'm currently a full-time PhD student in information science and a full-time employee. My research is focused on cyberbullying, which didn't align with the Navy's priorities for NICE funding. Would this affect my eligibility for the SMART scholarship for retention?
I'll say it likely, right? It sounds like your facility might not be in support of the degree that you're wanting to pursue, and that's step one. Is this degree something that is of value to the facility in an upskill, like for the purpose of upskilling in their workforce? If they don't think so, and you're not getting any NICE funding, I don't see this as being an advantageous program because you're missing that key factor of the support from the facility.
All right, and so we'll end on one more question. So if my sponsoring facility supports SMART, do I have a higher chance of being awarded a retention degree?
Talk to your leadership nonstop. They're the ones that are gonna like advocate for you in the decision-making process. Like if come January, they suddenly see your name on a SMART thing and you haven't had any conversation with them, I'm guessing it's going to be a difficult conversation in January versus now, or hopefully before now, you've already started talking to them about you want to go back to school, not necessarily SMART. Now that you know about SMART, I wanted to go do school with the SMART program, right? Like just because they are accepting SMART, you kind of have it. I don't want to say advantage, but as a retention, you're already in, and you just need your leadership to advocate for you in their decision-making process. So, you know, what does that mean? I don't know what that means for you individually, but if you're a high performer and you're doing well, you know, professionally, and you have a good relationship with your supervisor and probably the next rung of leadership, then there's a really good chance they're going to advocate for you very strongly when it comes time to pick the sponsoring facility SMART scholars. Keep talking, talk nonstop. Almost remind them every day that you are going to be a SMART scholar, because you don't want the only surprise that you want them to have is that none. You don't want them to have any surprises at SMART. You want them to know you're interested in SMART, you've applied to SMART, these are the universities you've applied to, this is how you think it's going to work, and that you're applying to ILIRs or whatever the internal research things are, that you have conversations about what your schedule is going to look like. You have conversations if you're concerned about like workload during courses. Just keep the more you communicate, the better you'll be, and chances are your leadership's going to start telling you that, you know, hey, I'm really advocating for you in the list. You know, we really want you to get this. It's going to look good on them because they're getting people awarded these scholarships. But to answer if your sponsoring facility has SMART, can I get SMART as a retention? You can, but it's not guaranteed. And if you suddenly surprise your leadership, I'm guessing you're not going to be very high on the list.
Yep.
All right. Okay, well, thank you, Nick, Marcus, and Alexis. I'm going to go ahead and share our contact screen. And Alexis, if you want to do kind of one more last plug for your webinar tomorrow and kind of how people can get the information for that webinar, and then we'll close it out from there.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. So that first email address, I'll start off smart@smartscholarship.org. You can ask general questions about the scholarship recruitment or retention. I know we had a lot of mix on this call. The next one, smartcl@smartscholarship.org. That is my team of component liaisons who are specifically assigned to the Army, Navy, Air Force, and other DoD. If you have questions about your facility, who's my POC, what is retention like at X specific organization that we weren't able to address here, reach out to smartcl@smartscholarship.org. That's also where you can access the Teams government link for the Air Force webinar tomorrow. Yeah, and check out our website. Join us on more of our webinars if you still have questions, and reach out. We've got a staff that's loves this program, so eager to help. This is the time. Marcus, anything from you?
Nothing much additional from me. Just wanted to tell you all thank you again for tuning in. We are going to collect the remaining questions and see if we can send out some type of FAQ sheet. So be on the lookout for that if your questions went unanswered. Thank you again for tuning in.
All right, perfect. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.